The desert sun beat down on Red Rock Canyon, painting the jagged cliffs in fiery hues of orange and red. It was a place of raw beauty, where hikers chased adventure and locals swore by its hidden secrets. 4 years ago, a young couple, Sarah and Ethan, set out on a trail here, their backpacks stuffed with water and dreams of a perfect day. They were the kind of people you'd notice, Sarah with her infectious laugh, Ethan with his quiet charm. They'd been together since college, saving up for a future they could build side by side. But that day, something went wrong. Terribly wrong. They never came back. Search parties scoured the canyon for weeks, helicopters buzzed overhead, and volunteers combed every crevice. Nothing. No trace, no clue, just silence. The mystery of their disappearance gripped the town, sparked endless theories, and left their families shattered. Some said they got lost in the maze of trails. Others whispered darker stories, abduction, foul play, or something unnatural lurking in the rocks. For 4 years, the case went cold, fading into a haunting legend. Until one morning, a jogger, a guy named Marcus, stumbled across something that turned his blood to ice. What he found out there in the canyon would unravel a truth so shocking, it would change everything we thought we knew about Sarah and Ethan's story. Now, let me take you somewhere else for a moment, a crowded bus in a small town, miles away from those red cliffs. It's a hot afternoon, the kind where the air feels sticky and tempers flare. A black teenager, Jamal, is sitting near the back, earbuds in, scrolling through his phone. He's 17, a high school senior with big dreams of college but not much money to make it happen. Life hasn't been easy for him, his mom works 2 jobs, and his little sister looks up to him like he's a superhero. Across the aisle, a pregnant white woman steps onto the bus, struggling to balance as it lurches forward. She's tired, her face flushed, and there's no empty seat in sight. Without a second thought, Jamal stands up, offering her his spot with a shy smile. She takes it gratefully, and they exchange a few polite words. Nothing special, just a small act of kindness. But as she gets off at her stop, she presses a folded note into his hand. "Read this later," she says, her eyes intense, almost urgent. Jamal tucks it into his pocket, not thinking much of it. Hours later, when he unfolds that note, his world turns upside down. What was written there wasn't just words, it was a key to something bigger, something that would tie his life to a mystery he never could have imagined. Back in Red Rock Canyon, Marcus is still catching his breath. He's a regular jogger, the kind who loves the quiet of the early morning trails. He knows these paths like the canyon well, but today, something feels off. The air is too still, the canyon too quiet. He's running along a narrow trail, one that's rarely used, when he spots it, a glint of metal half buried in the dirt. At first, he thinks it's trash, maybe a soda can left by careless hikers. But as he kneels down, his heart starts pounding. It's not trash. It's something personal, something that shouldn't be here. His hands shake as he brushes away the sand, revealing an object that sends a chill down his spine. It's tied to Sarah and Ethan, he's sure of it. But how? And why now, after all these years? Marcus pulls out his phone, his fingers fumbling as he dials 911. He doesn't know it yet, but what he's just uncovered is only the beginning, a thread that will pull him into a web of secrets, lies, and a truth that's been buried for far too long. Let's rewind a bit, back to Sarah and Ethan. They weren't just any couple. They were the kind of people who made you believe in love. Sarah was a teacher, always carrying a notebook full of lesson plans and doodles. Ethan was a photographer, obsessed with capturing the world through his lens. They'd moved to Nevada a year before their hike, chasing a quieter life after the chaos of city living. Their friends said they were inseparable, always planning their next adventure. That's why the hike made sense, it was classic Sarah and Ethan, exploring the wild, chasing a story to tell. But the canyon didn't give them back. Their car was found at the trailhead, keys still in the ignition. Their phones went straight to voicemail. Their families clung to hope, plastering missing posters across town, but as months turned to years, hope started to feel like a heavy weight. Theories swirled online, some said they'd run off to start a new life, others claimed they'd stumbled into something dangerous. A few even pointed to local legends, stories of strange lights in the canyon or hikers who vanished without a trace. But no one had answers. Not until Marcus's discovery lit a match in the dark. Meanwhile, Jamal's life is spiraling in a way he never expected. That note from the woman on the bus, it's not just a thank you. It's a message, cryptic and specific, with instructions he can't make sense of. It mentions a place, a time, and a name he doesn't recognize. At first, he thinks it's a mistake, meant for someone else. But the more he reads, the more it feels personal, like it was meant for him. He's not sure why, but he can't shake the feeling that following it could change his life. Jamal's not one to chase wild ideas, he's got enough trouble keeping up with school and helping his mom. But there's something about the note that pulls at him, like a whisper he can't ignore. He starts digging, asking questions, following the clues. What he doesn't know is that those clues are leading him straight toward Red Rock Canyon, toward a connection he shares with Sarah, Ethan, and Marcus. A connection that's been hidden for years, waiting for the right moment to surface. The canyon itself holds more than just one mystery. Locals talk about it in hushed tones, sharing stories passed down from their parents and grandparents. They say Red Rock isn't just a place, it's a keeper of truths, a landscape that swallows secrets and only reveals them when it's ready. Hikers have reported strange things for decades, compasses that fail, trails that seem to shift, and an eerie feeling of being watched. Some dismiss it as superstition, but others swear there's something out there, something that doesn't want to be found. Sarah and Ethan didn't know these stories when they set out that day. They were just looking for a view, a moment to feel alive. But what if they found something else? What if they stumbled onto something they weren't supposed to see? Marcus is starting to wonder the same thing as he stands over his discovery, the police now swarming the trail. The object he found isn't just a clue, it's a warning, a sign that someone, or something, wanted this to stay hidden. Jamal's search is picking up speed. The note has led him into a library, of all places, digging through old newspapers and local records. He's not sure what he's looking for, but every article he finds feels like a breadcrumb. He's starting to notice patterns, stories about Red Rock Canyon, about people who vanished, and about strange events that were never explained. His friends think he's losing it, chasing a conspiracy that doesn't exist. But Jamal's not so sure. The note mentioned a name, Ethan, and now he's found it in an old article about a missing couple. His pulse races as he reads. Could this be the same Ethan? And if so, why did that woman on the bus want him to know? Jamal's life, once so small and predictable, is now tangled in something vast, something that feels bigger than him. He's scared, but he's not stopping. Not yet. Back at the canyon, the police are sealing off the trail. Marcus is questioned, his story repeated over and over. He's just a jogger, he tells them, not a hero or a detective. But he can't unsee what he found. It's burned into his mind, a puzzle piece that doesn't fit. The officers exchange glances, their radios crackling with updates. They're not telling him everything, and he knows it. The discovery has stirred up old wounds, pulling Sarah and Ethan's case back into the spotlight. Reporters are already gathering, cameras flashing, ready to spin a new headline. The town is alive with whispers, and theories are resurfacing, wilder than ever. Did Sarah and Ethan get lost, or were they taken? Was it an accident, or something planned? And how does Marcus's find fit into it all? The answers are out there, somewhere in the canyon's red dust, but they won't come easy. Jamal's at a turning point now. The note's instructions are clear, but following them means stepping into the unknown. He's standing outside his apartment, the note in his hand, rereading it for the 100th time. His mom's voice echoes in his head, stay safe, don't do anything reckless. But he can't let this go. He makes a decision, one that will take him closer to Red Rock Canyon than he ever thought he'd go. He doesn't know it yet, but he's walking into the same story that swallowed Sarah, Ethan, a story that's been waiting for him all along. As the sun dips below the horizon, Red Rock Canyon sits quiet, its secrets buried deep. Marcus is home now, but he can't shake the feeling that he's being followed. The police are watching, digging, but they're tight-lipped, and he's just not sure what they're looking for. Jamal's on a bus, his heart racing, heading toward a truth he doesn't yet understand. And somewhere, out there, the pieces of Sarah's and Ethan's story are waiting to be found. What did Marcus find on that trail? What's in Jamal's note? And what really happened to the couple who vanished 4 years ago? The answers hang in the air, just out of reach, but they're a promise that's coming closer than anyone thinks. Stick with me, because this story's just beginning and it's about to take us somewhere we can't turn back from. The bus rumbled through the night, its headlights cutting through the dark as Jamal stared out the window. His reflection flickered in the glass, a mix of determination and fear in his eyes. The note was still in his pocket, creased from being unfolded and read so many times. He didn't know why he was doing this, heading toward Red Rock Canyon, a place he'd only ever heard about in passing. But the note had been clear, a date, a time, a trail marker. And that name Ethan kept circling in his head. The article he'd found in the library mentioned Ethan and Sarah, the couple who vanished 4 years ago. It wasn't much, just a few paragraphs about their hike and the search that followed, but it was enough to make Jamal's skin prickle. Why would a stranger on a bus hand him a note tied to a missing persons case? And why did it feel like she knew him? The bus hit a bump, jolting him back to the moment. He glanced at the other passengers, mostly tired folks heading home, none of them paying him any mind. His phone buzzed with a text from his mom. "Where are you? Call me." He typed a quick reply, promising he'd be back soon, but he didn't tell her where he was going. Not yet. He wasn't sure he could explain it himself. Back in town, Marcus was pacing his small apartment, the TV droning in the background with a news report about the canyon. The anchor's voice was calm, but the words were heavy. New evidence in the Red Rock Canyon disappearance. Police are investigating. Marcus muted it, his head spinning. He hadn't slept since finding that object on the trail, a bracelet, silver and scratched, with a small charm shaped like a camera. It wasn't just any bracelet. He'd seen it before, in one of the old missing posters for Sarah and Ethan. Ethan's bracelet, the one his sister said he never took off. Marcus had handed it over to the police, but not before snapping a photo on his phone. He kept pulling it up, zooming in, as if the image could tell him something more. The cops had been vague, thanking him but ushering him off the scene. They'd asked too many questions. Why was he on that trail? Had he seen anyone else? Did he touch anything else? It felt less like gratitude and more like suspicion. Now, he couldn't shake the feeling he was being watched. Every creak in his apartment made him jump. He stopped pacing and peered out the window, half expecting to see someone in the shadows. Nothing but the empty street. Still, his gut told him this wasn't over, not for him, not for Sarah and Ethan. 4 years earlier, Sarah and Ethan had been planning their hike with the kind of excitement that made their friends jealous. They'd been cooped up in their new apartment for weeks, unpacking boxes and adjusting to life in Nevada. The move was supposed to be a fresh start, a chance to slow down and focus on each other. Sarah had just landed a job at a local elementary school, and Ethan was freelancing, selling his photos to magazines and websites. They were happy, or at least they seemed to be. But their friends noticed little things. Sarah seemed distracted sometimes, checking her phone more than usual. Ethan was quieter, like he was carrying a weight he didn't want to share. No one thought much of it at the time. They were just a couple settling into a new place, right? The hike was their way of reclaiming some joy. They'd picked a moderate trail, one with sweeping views of the canyon's red cliffs. They packed light water, snacks, a camera, and told their friends they'd be back by dinner. Their last text to Sarah's sister was a selfie, the two of them grinning against a backdrop of towering rocks. After that, nothing. Their silence was like a stone dropped into a pond, sending ripples through everyone who knew them. Jamal's bus pulled into a small station just outside the canyon's visitor center. It was late, the lot nearly empty except for a few parked cars. He stepped off, the cool desert air hitting his face. The note had mentioned a trailhead called Coyote's Path, one that wasn't on most maps. He'd looked it up at the library, finding only a brief mention in an old hiking guide. It was a rugged trail, rarely used, with warnings about loose rocks and sudden drops. Jamal's stomach twisted as he adjusted his backpack. He wasn't a hiker. He'd grown up in a town where the closest thing to nature was a park with patchy grass. But something about the note made him feel like he had to do this. He pulled out his phone's flashlight and started walking, following a faded sign pointing toward the trail. The canyon loomed around him, its cliffs like silent giants. Every rustle in the brush made his heart race. He kept thinking about the woman on the bus, her intense eyes, the way she'd pressed the note into his hand. Who was she? And why him? He didn't have answers, but he kept moving, one step at a time. Marcus, meanwhile, was digging into the past. He couldn't let the bracelet go. He'd always been curious, the kind of guy who liked puzzles and true crime podcasts. But this was different. This was real. He opened his laptop and started searching, pulling up old articles about Sarah and Ethan. Most of them were the same details about the search, quotes from their families, speculation about what happened. But one blog post caught his eye, written by someone claiming to be a local. It mentioned strange activity in the canyon around the time the couple vanished, unmarked vehicles near the trails, hushed conversations among rangers. The post was vague, almost paranoid, but it planted a seed in Marcus's mind. What if Sarah and Ethan hadn't just gotten lost? What if they'd seen something they weren't supposed to? He cross-referenced the dates, noticing a small detail: a mining company had been surveying the canyon that same month. Nothing came of it, or so the reports said. But Marcus wasn't so sure. He jotted down the company's name, his pulse quickening. He didn't know what he was chasing, but he couldn't stop now. Sarah and Ethan's families had never stopped searching, even when the police scaled back. Sarah's sister, Claire, was the loudest voice, organizing vigils and keeping the case alive online. She'd posted photos of Sarah's notebook, filled with sketches of the canyon and notes about its history. Ethan's parents, quieter but no less broken, shared stories of his photography, how he'd always been drawn to places with a story. They'd offered rewards, begged for tips, but the leads dried up. Claire, though, never bought the lost hiker theory. She'd told reporters Sarah was too careful, too prepared. And Ethan? He'd grown up camping, knew how to read a map. Something else happened, Claire insisted. Something no one was talking about. She'd even gotten anonymous messages over the years, cryptic texts, voicemails with no caller ID. Most were dead ends, but one stuck with her, a woman's voice, low and urgent, saying they didn't leave. Claire had played it for the police, but they'd dismissed it as a prank. Now, with Marcus's discovery, Claire was back at the station, demanding answers. The bracelet was Ethan's, she was sure of it. But why was it buried? And where were Sarah and Ethan? Jamal reached the trailhead, his flashlight catching a weathered marker half hidden by brush. Coyote's Path. The note had said to look for a rock formation shaped like a crescent moon, about a mile in. He hesitated, the darkness pressing in. He wasn't sure what he expected to find: a clue, a sign, maybe nothing at all. But he couldn't turn back. Not after coming this far. He started up the trail, his sneakers crunching on gravel. The canyon felt alive, its whispers carried on the wind. He thought about his mom, his sister, the life he was trying to build. College seemed so far away now, like a dream he couldn't touch. But the note had promised something, a chance, a change. He didn't know what it meant, but he clung to it like a lifeline. As he climbed, he noticed scratches on the rocks, faint but deliberate, like someone had marked the way. His breath caught. Was this part of the note's instructions? Or something else? He kept going, the crescent moon rock nowhere in sight. Marcus's apartment was a mess of notes and printouts now. He'd spent hours online, chasing leads that went nowhere. The mining company, Silver Peak Resources, had a website, but it was barebones, just corporate jargon about sustainable exploration. He found an old forum post claiming Silver Peak had been prospecting in Red Rock without permits, but the thread was locked, the user banned. Marcus leaned back, rubbing his eyes. He was in over his head, but he couldn't let it go. The bracelet wasn't just a clue, it was a call to action. He thought about Sarah and Ethan, their smiling faces in that last selfie. They deserved answers. He pulled up the photo of the bracelet again, noticing something he'd missed, a tiny engraving on the charm, barely legible. He squinted, making out the letters, S&E Sarah and Ethan. His heart sank. This wasn't just Ethan's bracelet, it was theirs, a shared promise. He grabbed his phone, ready to call the police, but stopped. What if they weren't telling him everything? What if they were hiding something? Jamal was deep in the trail now, the canyon walls closing in. His flashlight flickered, and he cursed under his breath. The scratches on the rocks were more frequent, forming a pattern he couldn't decode. He was starting to doubt himself. What if the note was a hoax? What if he was out here for nothing? But then he saw it, a rock formation, curved like a crescent moon, glowing faintly in the starlight. His pulse raced as he approached, the note's words echoing in his mind, "Find the crescent. Look beneath." He knelt, his hands brushing the dirt. It was loose, like it had been disturbed. He dug, his fingers scraping against something hard. Not a rock, something man-made. He pulled it free, his breath hitching. It was a small metal box, rusted but intact. His hands shook as he opened it, the hinges creaking. Inside was a single item, a folded piece of paper, yellowed with age. He unfolded it, his flashlight revealing handwriting that matched the note in his pocket. The words were simple, but they hit like a punch. "They know. Run." Jamal's blood ran cold. Who knew? And why was this here, in the middle of nowhere? Back in town, Claire was leaving the police station, her face set with resolve. The cops had confirmed the bracelet was Ethan's, but they wouldn't say more. She'd overheard them talking about reopening the case, and it lit a fire in her. She'd always believed Sarah and Ethan were out there, waiting for someone to find them. She pulled out her phone, scrolling through voicemails. That woman's voice, "They didn't leave," played again, sending a chill down her spine. She didn't know Marcus, but she'd seen him on the news, the jogger who'd found the bracelet. He was part of this now, whether he wanted to be or not. She found his name online, hesitating before sending him a message, "We need to talk. I know about Sarah and Ethan." She hit send, unaware that miles away, Jamal was staring at a note that could unravel everything. The canyon was silent now, its secrets stirring in the dark. Jamal clutched the box, his mind racing. Marcus sat in his apartment, his phone buzzing with Claire's message. Claire stood outside, her heart pounding as she waited for a reply. And somewhere, the truth about Sarah and Ethan was closer than ever, but it was wrapped in shadows, waiting for the right moment to break free. The desert held its breath, and the story was far from over. Jamal stood frozen under the crescent moon rock, the metal box heavy in his hands. The note inside, "They know. Run." Burned in his mind, its words sharp and urgent. His flashlight cast jagged shadows on the canyon walls, and every snap of a twig made him flinch. Who were they? And why was this box buried here, waiting for him? The desert air was cold now, sinking into his bones, but he couldn't move. Not yet. He stuffed the note back into the box and shoved it into his backpack, his eyes darting around the trail. The scratches on the rocks seemed to glow faintly, like they were pointing him somewhere or warning him to leave. He wasn't sure which. Jamal's life had been simple before that bus ride: school, his mom's late shifts, his sister's endless questions about the world. Now he was standing in Red Rock Canyon, chasing a mystery that felt like it could swallow him whole. He took a shaky breath and started back down the trail, his sneakers slipping on loose gravel. He didn't know what he'd do with the box or the note, but he knew he couldn't stay here. Not with the canyon whispering secrets he wasn't ready to hear. In town, Marcus's phone buzzed again, Claire's message lighting up the screen, "We need to talk. I know about Sarah and Ethan." He stared at it, his thumb hovering over the reply button. He didn't know Claire, but her name was familiar from the news. Sarah's sister, the one who'd never stopped pushing for answers. Part of him wanted to respond, to spill everything about the bracelet and his suspicions about Silver Peak Resources. But another part, the one that kept him up at night, told him to stay out of it. He was just a jogger, not some detective. Still, the engraving on the bracelet S&E haunted him. It wasn't just a clue, it was a promise, a piece of two people who'd vanished without a trace. Marcus glanced at the pile of notes on his desk, the scribbled names and dates tying back to the mining company. He'd found more online, a lawsuit from years ago, quickly settled, about Silver Peak's unpermitted activities in the canyon. The details were murky, but it was enough to make him wonder, had Sarah and Ethan stumbled onto something out there? Something worth hiding? His phone buzzed again, another message from Claire, "Please. I saw you on the news. You found something." Marcus's jaw tightened. He typed a reply, "Meet me tomorrow, coffee shop on Main, 10 a.m. and hit send before he could change his mind. Claire was still outside the police station, her breath visible in the chilly night air. She'd spent hours there, pressing the detective for details about the bracelet. They'd confirmed it was Ethan's, but their answers stopped there. "We're following leads," they said, their voices flat, like they'd said it 1,000 times before. Claire wasn't buying it. She'd spent 4 years chasing dead ends, sifting through tips that led nowhere, and she knew when someone was holding back. The detective's eyes had flickered when she mentioned the anonymous voicemail. They didn't leave, like it wasn't the first time he'd heard it. Claire's hands shook as she replayed it in her mind. That woman's voice, low and urgent, had stayed with her, a thread she couldn't let go. She'd always believed Sarah and Ethan hadn't just gotten lost. Sarah was too smart, too cautious. And Ethan? He'd grown up in the woods, knew how to survive. Claire's gut told her they'd seen something or someone out there in the canyon. Now, with Marcus's find, she felt closer to the truth than ever. But the truth scared her, too. She glanced at her phone, seeing Marcus's reply, and her heart skipped. Tomorrow, she'd finally meet someone who might understand. Meanwhile, miles away, the woman from the bus sat in a dimly lit diner, her fingers tracing the rim of a coffee cup. Her name was Lila, though Jamal didn't know that. She hadn't meant to get involved, not again. But when she saw him on that bus, his kind eyes and quiet strength, she couldn't help it. He reminded her of someone she'd lost, someone who'd trusted her once. Lila had been running for years, keeping secrets that weren't hers to tell. She'd been in Red Rock Canyon 4 years ago, working as a surveyor for Silver Peak Resources. It was supposed to be a simple job: map the land, mark the sites, get out. But things went wrong. She'd seen things she wasn't supposed to, heard conversations that made her blood run cold. When Sarah and Ethan vanished, she knew it wasn't an accident. She'd left town soon after, changing her name, staying off the grid. But the guilt followed her, heavy and relentless. Handing Jamal that note was her way of breaking the silence, of passing the torch to someone who might finish what she couldn't. She didn't know if he'd follow it, but she hoped. The diner's neon sign buzzed overhead, and Lila's eyes flicked to the door, half expecting trouble to walk in. Jamal made it back to the bus station, his backpack heavier with the weight of the box. The note's words, "They know. Run." Kept looping in his head, louder now. He sat on a bench, waiting for the next bus, his hands gripping the straps of his bag. He wanted to open the box again, to reread the note, but something stopped him. It felt too real, too dangerous. He thought about his mom, how worried she'd be if she knew where he was. He thought about his sister, her big dreams of becoming a doctor. He'd always wanted to protect them, to make their lives better. But this was bigger than him, bigger than anything he'd ever faced. He pulled out his phone, scrolling through the article he'd found about Sarah and Ethan. Their faces stared back at him, smiling, unaware of what was coming. Jamal's chest tightened. He didn't know them, but he felt connected, like their story was now his. The bus pulled up, its doors hissing open, but Jamal didn't move. He was starting to think running wasn't an option anymore. Marcus couldn't sleep. He lay on his couch, the TV flickering with a late-night talk show he wasn't watching. His mind was back on the trail, replaying the moment he'd found the bracelet. The dirt had been loose, like someone had buried it recently. But why? If it was Ethan's, how did it end up there, 4 years after they vanished? And why that trail, one so remote even locals avoided it? Marcus's thoughts drifted to Silver Peak. The company's name kept popping up, a shadow in every article and post he'd read. He'd found a grainy photo online, taken by a hiker years ago, showing an unmarked truck near the canyon's edge. The logo was blurry, but it looked like Silver Peak's. Marcus didn't know what it meant, but it felt like a piece of the puzzle. He thought about Claire, about meeting her tomorrow. Would she have answers, or just more questions? He closed his eyes, but sleep didn't come. Instead, he saw the canyon, its red rocks looming, hiding something he wasn't sure he wanted to find. Claire was home now, sitting at her kitchen table, surrounded by photos of Sarah. Her sister's laugh echoed in her memory, bright and unstoppable. Claire had always looked up to her, even when they fought. Sarah was the planner, the one who made lists and dreamed big. When she and Ethan moved to Nevada, Claire had been jealous, wishing she could start over somewhere new. Now, she'd give anything to have her back. She opened Sarah's notebook, the one she'd found in their apartment after they vanished. The pages were filled with sketches, canyon cliffs, desert flowers, strange symbols Claire didn't recognize. One page had a note scrawled in the margin, asking about the lights. Claire's breath caught. Lights? What lights? She'd shown it to the police, but they'd brushed it off. Now, with the bracelet resurfacing, she wondered if Sarah had been onto something. Had she and Ethan seen lights in the canyon? Or something else? Claire's fingers traced the symbols, her mind racing. She didn't know Marcus, but she hoped he'd be the ally she needed. Lila left the diner, pulling her hood up against the wind. She'd been careful, staying out of sight, but handing Jamal that note had been a risk. She didn't know if he'd follow it, or if he'd even understand. But she couldn't carry the truth alone anymore. For years ago, she'd been part of Silver Peak's survey team, mapping a section of Red Rock Canyon they weren't supposed to be in. The company had been quiet about it, paying off rangers, moving at night. Lila hadn't asked questions at first, she needed the job. But then she'd overheard her boss talking about clearing the site, about making sure no one got too close. The day Sarah and Ethan vanished, Lila had seen them on the trail, their camera flashing in the distance. She'd warned her boss, thinking they'd just be shooed away. But the next day, they were gone, and Silver Peak's crew packed up overnight. Lila had quit soon after, but the fear stayed with her. She knew too much, and they knew she knew. Now, with Jamal out there, she prayed she hadn't put him in danger. Jamal finally boarded the bus, the box tucked deep in his bag. He sat by the window, his reflection pale in the glass. The note's warning, "Run," felt like a weight on his chest. He didn't know who they were, but he felt their presence, like eyes in the dark. He thought about the woman on the bus, her urgency, her fear. She'd chosen him for a reason, but why? He wasn't special, just a kid trying to make it through high school. But the box in his bag said otherwise. It was proof something was out there, something tied to Sarah and Ethan. As the bus rolled through the desert, Jamal made a decision. He couldn't run, not yet. He needed answers, for himself, for his family, for the couple who'd never come home. He didn't know it, but his path was converging with Marcus's, with Claire's, with Lila's, a collision that would shake the canyon's secrets loose. Marcus's phone buzzed one last time, a text from an unknown number. "Be careful what you ask about the canyon." His blood ran cold. He checked the number, but it was blocked. He looked out his window, the street still empty, but the message felt like a warning. Claire, at her table, stared at Sarah's notebook, the symbols blurring through her tears. Lila walked through the night, her steps quick, her heart heavy with regret. And Jamal, on the bus, clutched his bag, the box inside a ticking clock. Red Rock Canyon loomed in the distance, its cliffs silent but alive, holding truths that were clawing their way out. The conflict was growing, its edges sharp and unforgiving, and no one was ready for what came next. The coffee shop on Main Street was quiet the next morning, the kind of quiet that felt heavy, like the air before a storm. Marcus sat in a corner booth, his coffee untouched, his eyes scanning the door every time it opened. Claire's message had kept him up all night, and that anonymous text, "Be careful what you ask about the canyon," sat like a stone in his gut. He'd brought his notes, a messy stack of papers scribbled with names, dates, and questions about Silver Peak resources. The bracelet, Ethan's bracelet, was the key, he was sure of it, but to what? He checked his phone again, rereading Claire's last message, "I'll be there. Look for the red scarf." The door jingled, and a woman walked in, her red scarf bright against her dark coat. "Claire." She spotted him, her face tight with exhaustion and hope, and slid into the booth. "You're Marcus," she said, not a question. He nodded, unsure where to start. Before he could speak, she leaned in, her voice low. "That bracelet you found, it's Ethan's." "I know it is. But the police won't tell me anything." "What else did you see out there?" Marcus hesitated, the anonymous text flashing in his mind. He didn't know Claire, but her eyes, raw with years of grief, told him she was in this as deep as he was. He pulled out his phone, showing her the photo of the bracelet. It was buried, he said. Not deep, like someone wanted it found. Claire's breath caught, her fingers trembling as she zoomed in on the S&D engraving. They didn't just get lost, she whispered. They saw something. I know it. Jamal was back home, the metal box hidden under his bed. He hadn't slept, the note's warning, they know. Run. Echoing in his head like a heartbeat. He sat on his bedroom floor, the box open in front of him, the yellowed paper staring back. He'd read it 100 times, but it still didn't make sense. Who were they? And why was this box buried in Red Rock Canyon, tied to a couple who'd vanished years ago? His mom was at work, his sister at school, and the apartment was too quiet, amplifying every creak. He'd locked the door, checked the windows, but he couldn't shake the feeling he was being watched. The note from the bus, the one that started this, was on his desk, its handwriting matching the one in the box. He'd tried searching online for anything about Sarah and Ethan, but the articles were old, repetitive, missing hikers, no leads, case gone cold. But one detail stuck, Ethan's camera. It was never found, not with their car or their bags. Jamal's eyes flicked to the box. What if the camera was out there, too? What if it held answers? His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. You found it. Don't tell anyone. His heart stopped. He dropped the phone, scrambling to his feet. Someone knew he'd been to the canyon. Someone knew about the box. Claire and Marcus were deep in conversation now, their voices hushed in the coffee shop. Claire pulled out Sarah's notebook, flipping to the page with the strange symbols and the note, asking about the lights. Sarah was obsessed with the canyon's history, she said, her finger tracing the sketches. She'd read about old mining claims, native legends, stuff most people ignored. She thought there was something special out there. Marcus frowned, his mind flashing to Silver Peak. There was a mining company, he said, sliding a printout across the table. Silver Peak Resources. They were in the canyon around the time Sarah and Ethan disappeared. Something about unpermitted surveys. Claire's eyes widened, her hands gripping the notebook. Sarah mentioned a company once, she said. She said they were digging in places they shouldn't. I thought she was just being paranoid. Marcus leaned forward, his voice barely above a whisper. What if she wasn't? What if they saw something they weren't supposed to? Claire's face paled. She opened her mouth to reply, but her phone buzzed, a voicemail notification. She played it, her hands shaking. That same woman's voice, low and urgent. Stop asking questions. You're getting too close. The coffee shop felt smaller, the walls closing in. Marcus's eyes darted to the window, catching a glimpse of a man in a dark jacket standing across the street, watching. Meanwhile, miles away, the woman from the bus sat in a dimly lit diner, her fingers tracing the rim of a coffee cup. Her name was Lila, though Jamal didn't know that. She hadn't meant to get involved, not again. But when she saw him on that bus, his kind eyes and quiet strength, she couldn't help it. He reminded her of someone she'd lost, someone who'd trusted her once. Lila had been running for years, keeping secrets that weren't hers to tell. She'd been in Red Rock Canyon 4 years ago, working as a surveyor for Silver Peak Resources. It was supposed to be a simple job: map the land, mark the sites, get out. But things went wrong. She'd seen things she wasn't supposed to, heard conversations that made her blood run cold. When Sarah and Ethan vanished, she knew it wasn't an accident. She'd left town soon after, changing her name, staying off the grid. But the guilt followed her, heavy and relentless. Handing Jamal that note was her way of breaking the silence, of passing the torch to someone who might finish what she couldn't. She didn't know if he'd follow it, but she hoped. The diner's neon sign buzzed overhead, and Lila's eyes flicked to the door, half expecting trouble to walk in. Jamal made it back to the bus station, his backpack heavier with the weight of the box. The note's words, they know. Run. Kept looping in his head, louder now. He sat on a bench, waiting for the next bus, his hands gripping the straps of his bag. He wanted to open the box again, to reread the note, but something stopped him. It felt too real, too dangerous. He thought about his mom, how worried she'd be if she knew where he was. He thought about his sister, her big dreams of becoming a doctor. He'd always wanted to protect them, to make their lives better. But this was bigger than him, bigger than anything he'd ever faced. He pulled out his phone, scrolling through the article he'd found about Sarah and Ethan. Their faces stared back at him, smiling, unaware of what was coming. Jamal's chest tightened. He didn't know them, but he felt connected, like their story was now his. The bus pulled up, its doors hissing open, but Jamal didn't move. He was starting to think running wasn't an option anymore. Marcus couldn't sleep. He lay on his couch, the TV flickering with a late-night talk show he wasn't watching. His mind was back on the trail, replaying the moment he'd found the bracelet. The dirt had been loose, like someone had buried it recently. But why? If it was Ethan's, how did it end up there, for years after they vanished? And why that trail, one so remote even locals avoided it? Marcus's thoughts drifted to Silver Peak. The company's name kept popping up, a shadow in every article and post he'd read. He'd found a grainy photo online, taken by a hiker years ago, showing an unmarked truck near the canyon's edge. The logo was blurry, but it looked like Silver Peaks. Marcus didn't know what it meant, but it felt like a piece of the puzzle. He thought about Claire, about meeting her tomorrow. Would she have answers, or just more questions? He closed his eyes, but sleep didn't come. Instead, he saw the canyon, its red rocks looming, hiding something he wasn't sure he wanted to find. Claire was home now, sitting at her kitchen table, surrounded by photos of Sarah. Her sister's laugh echoed in her memory, bright and unstoppable. Claire had always looked up to her, even when they fought. Sarah was the planner, the one who made lists and dreamed big. When she and Ethan moved to Nevada, Claire had been jealous, wishing she could start over somewhere new. Now, she'd give anything to have her back. She opened Sarah's notebook, the one she'd found in their apartment after they vanished. The pages were filled with sketches, canyon cliffs, desert flowers, strange symbols Claire didn't recognize. One page had a note scrawled in the margin, asking about the lights. Claire's breath caught. Lights? What lights? She'd shown it to the police, but they'd brushed it off. Now, with the bracelet resurfacing, she wondered if Sarah had been onto something. Had she and Ethan seen lights in the canyon? Or something else? Claire's fingers traced the symbols, her mind racing. She didn't know Marcus, but she hoped he'd be the ally she needed. Lila left the diner, pulling her hood up against the wind. She'd been careful, staying out of sight, but handing Jamal that note had been a risk. She didn't know if he'd follow it, or if he'd even understand. But she couldn't carry the truth alone anymore. For years ago, she'd been part of Silver Peak's survey team, mapping a section of Red Rock Canyon they weren't supposed to be in. The company had been quiet about it, paying off rangers, moving at night. Lila hadn't asked questions at first, she needed the job. But then she'd overheard her boss talking about clearing the site, about making sure no one got too close. The day Sarah and Ethan vanished, Lila had seen them on the trail, their camera flashing in the distance. She'd warned her boss, thinking they'd just be shooed away. But the next day, they were gone, and Silver Peak's crew packed up overnight. Lila had quit soon after, but the fear stayed with her. She knew too much, and they knew she knew. Now, with Jamal out there, she prayed she hadn't put him in danger. Jamal finally boarded the bus, the box tucked deep in his bag. He sat by the window, his reflection pale in the glass. The note's warning, "Run," felt like a weight on his chest. He didn't know who they were, but he felt their presence, like eyes in the dark. He thought about the woman on the bus, her urgency, her fear. She'd chosen him for a reason, but why? He wasn't special, just a kid trying to make it through high school. But the box in his bag said otherwise. It was proof something was out there, something tied to Sarah and Ethan. As the bus rolled through the desert, Jamal made a decision. He couldn't run, not yet. He needed answers, for himself, for his family, for the couple who'd never come home. He didn't know it, but his path was converging with Marcus's, with Claire's, with Lila's, a collision that would shake the canyon's secrets loose. Marcus's phone buzzed one last time, a text from an unknown number. "Be careful what you ask about the canyon." His blood ran cold. He checked the number, but it was blocked. He looked out his window, the street still empty, but the message felt like a warning. Claire, at her table, stared at Sarah's notebook, the symbols blurring through her tears. Lila walked through the night, her steps quick, her heart heavy with regret. And Jamal, on the bus, clutched his bag, the box inside a ticking clock. Red Rock Canyon loomed in the distance, its cliffs silent but alive, holding truths that were clawing their way out. The conflict was growing, its edges sharp and unforgiving, and no one was ready for what came next. The canyon air was heavy as Claire, Marcus, Jamal, and Lila followed Ranger Tom back to the trailhead, the USB drive clutched tightly in Claire's hand. The revelation of another box hidden somewhere in Red Rock Canyon hung over them like a storm cloud, its implications sinking in. The truth about Sarah and Ethan's fate was out. Silver Peak Resources had silenced them to hide their illegal drilling, a cover-up that cost 2 lives. But the news of another box meant the story wasn't over, and the danger was far from gone. Claire's legs felt weak, her grief for Sarah raw but now mixed with a burning need to finish what her sister had started. Marcus walked beside her, his jaw tight, his eyes scanning the cliffs as if they might reveal the next clue. Jamal trailed behind, his backpack lighter without the metal box but his mind heavy with questions. Why had the woman on the bus chosen him? And what else was out there, waiting to be found? Lila, silent but resolute, kept pace, her guilt driving her to see this through. Tom led the way, his radio crackling with updates from the rangers who'd taken the Silver Peak men into custody. The canyon, with its towering red rocks and hidden crevices, seemed to watch them, its secrets not yet fully uncovered. At the trailhead, a small crowd had gathered, reporters, locals, and more rangers, drawn by the news of the arrests and the reopened case. Camera flashes lit up the dusk, and Claire shielded her eyes, the USB drive a lifeline in her pocket. She thought of Sarah's notebook, the sketches of the canyon, the note about lights. Those lights had been Silver Peak's equipment, operating under cover of night, polluting the land Sarah loved. Ethan's camera had captured it all, and they'd paid the ultimate price. Tom pulled Claire aside, his voice low. "We'll find the other box," he said. Ethan was smart, he wouldn't have left just one. "But you need to get that drive to the right people. The media, someone you trust. Silver Peak's got connections, and they'll try to bury this again." Claire nodded, her resolve hardening. She'd spent 4 years fighting for answers, and now she had proof. She wasn't letting it slip away. Marcus, still shaken from the standoff, approached Jamal, who stood apart from the crowd, his eyes distant. "You okay, kid?" Marcus asked, his voice soft. Jamal shrugged, the weight of the day pressing on him. "I don't even know why I'm here," he admitted. "That woman on the bus, she gave me the note, sent me to the canyon. I thought it was about helping someone, but now," he trailed off, thinking of the texts, the car outside his apartment, the fear that had followed him. Marcus clapped a hand on his shoulder. "You did good. You found that box, gave us a chance to finish this." Jamal nodded, but the question lingered. Why him? He thought of his mom, his sister, the college dreams he'd pushed aside. Maybe this was his way of proving he could be more, that a small act of kindness on a bus could lead to something bigger. Lila, standing by her car, watched the group with a mix of relief and dread. She'd confessed her role to Tom, her time with Silver Peak, her warning to her boss about Sarah and Ethan, her years of running from the truth. The Rangers had taken her statement, but she knew the company's reach went deep. Her phone buzzed, another message from her old boss, "You can't hide forever." She deleted it, her hands steady now. She'd spent too long hiding, letting guilt eat her alive. Stepping forward, she approached Jamal, her voice soft. "I'm Lila," she said. "The woman from the bus." Jamal's eyes widened, his breath catching. "Why me?" he asked, the question spilling out. Lila's gaze softened. "You reminded me of someone I lost, a kid who was kind, who didn't deserve to get caught up in this. I saw you give up your seat, and I knew you'd do the right thing." Jamal swallowed, his throat tight. He didn't feel like a hero, but her words gave him something to hold on to. The next morning, Claire sat in a small newsroom, the USB drive plugged into a laptop. A reporter, a woman named Maria who'd covered Sarah and Ethan's case years ago, scrolled through the photos, grainy images of Silver Peak's drilling equipment, barrels of chemicals half buried in the canyon, men in unmarked jackets watching the trail. One photo showed Sarah and Ethan, their faces lit by a flashlight, unaware of the danger. Claire's eyes stung, but she kept her voice steady. "They died for this," she said. "You have to make sure everyone knows." Maria nodded, her fingers flying across her keyboard. "This is bigger than Silver Peak," she said. "These chemicals, they've been linked to water contamination in town. People have been sick for years." Claire's heart sank. Sarah and Ethan hadn't just stumbled onto a secret, they'd uncovered a scandal that had hurt countless others. The story would break soon, Maria promised, and Silver Peak's days were numbered. Marcus was back at the canyon, volunteering with the rangers to search for the second box. Tom had shared more details. Ethan had been meticulous, leaving markers across the canyon to ensure his evidence survived. The scratches on the rocks, the crescent moon formation, the hidden crevices, they were all part of his plan. Marcus followed Tom's lead, his eyes scanning the trail for anything out of place. He thought about the bracelet, the S&E engraving, the love it represented. He wasn't a detective, just a jogger who'd stumbled into a mystery, but he felt connected to Sarah and Ethan now, like he owed them this. Near a narrow ravine, he spotted another set of scratches, fainter but deliberate. "Here," he called, his voice echoing. Tom knelt beside him, brushing away dirt to reveal another lockbox, identical to the one Jamal had found. Inside was a notebook, its pages filled with Ethan's handwriting, dates, locations, names of Silver Peak executives. Marcus's pulse raced. This wasn't just evidence, it was a map to the truth. Jamal was at home, his mom's arms around him as he told her everything. She'd been furious at first, scared for his safety, but her anger melted into pride as he explained the box, the note, the canyon. "You're braver than I ever was," she said, her voice thick. Jamal's sister, overhearing, hugged him too, her eyes wide. "You're like a superhero," she said, and for the first time in days, Jamal smiled. He thought about Lila, about her choosing him because of a simple act of kindness. That moment on the bus had changed his life, set him on a path he never expected. He pulled out his phone, scrolling through college applications he'd abandoned. Maybe, he thought, this was his chance to start again, to chase the future he'd always wanted. Lila faced her own reckoning, meeting with the rangers to provide a full account of Silver Peak's operation. She named names, shared dates, even pointed them to old records she'd kept hidden. The guilt she'd carried for 4 years was still there, but it was lighter now, shared with others who wanted justice. The rangers assured her they'd protect her, but Lila knew Silver Peak wouldn't go down quietly. She moved to a new town, a fresh start, but kept in touch with Claire, promising to testify if the case went to court. She thought about Jamal, about the kid who'd given her hope. She'd chosen him because he was kind, but he'd proven he was more brave, determined, a spark in the dark. The story broke the next day, Maria's article hitting every major outlet. Red Rock Canyon scandal, missing couples evidence exposes corporate cover-up. The photos from Ethan's camera, paired with his notebook, painted a damning picture. Silver Peak had been dumping toxic chemicals, poisoning the land and the town's water supply. The company's executives were arrested, their permits revoked, and lawsuits flooded in from families affected by the contamination. Claire stood at a press conference, Sarah's notebook in her hands, her voice steady as she read Ethan's final note, for Sarah's sister. "Show the world." She cried as she spoke, but her words carried strength, a promise to her sister that their fight wasn't in vain. The crowd applauded, and Marcus, standing in the back, felt a weight lift. He'd been a jogger, nothing more, but he'd helped uncover a truth that changed lives. The second box's contents filled in the gaps, names of officials bribed to stay silent, locations of other dumping sites, even a recorded conversation Ethan had secretly captured. The evidence was overwhelming, and Silver Peak collapsed under the pressure. The canyon, once a place of secrets, became a symbol of justice, its trails now marked with plaques honoring Sarah and Ethan. Claire visited often, leaving flowers at the crescent moon rock, whispering to her sister that she'd done it. Marcus kept jogging the trails, his eyes always scanning for new scratches, new stories. Jamal applied to college, a scholarship in his name funded by donations from the town, inspired by his courage. Lila started over, her past no longer a shadow but a story she could tell. But the final twist lingered, a quiet shock that stayed with them. Months later, a hiker found a third box, buried deeper in the canyon, its contents unlike the others. Inside was a single photo, not of Silver Peak's operation but of Sarah and Ethan, smiling, with a note in Sarah's handwriting, "We knew we might not make it. But we love you, Claire. Keep fighting." Tucked beside it was a locket, identical to one Claire wore, a gift from Sarah years ago. How it ended up there, no one could say. The canyon had given up its secrets, but it held on to its mysteries, a reminder that some truths are never fully told. Claire wore the locket every day, a piece of her sister close to her heart, a promise to keep fighting for what was right. The takeaway was clear: kindness, courage, and truth could unravel even the darkest secrets. Jamal's small act on a bus had sparked a chain that brought down a company. Marcus's curiosity had lit a path to justice. Claire's love for her sister had kept the fight alive. And Lila's redemption had tied them all together. Red Rock Canyon stood quiet now, its cliffs no longer hiding but healing, a place where a couple's love and sacrifice had changed everything. The story ended, but its echoes lived on, in the town, in the people, in the red dust that carried their names.